All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here with us today. My name is Steve App. I'm the Associate Vice President of Marketing and Business Development here at Simpson Scarborough. And on behalf of our entire agency, I sincerely appreciate you entrusting us with the next hour of your time and attention for what I think is going to be a really great conversation. Not the sexiest way to start out, but a few housekeeping notes to get us started today. First of all, we are recording this webinar. And as someone who registered and is attending this webinar, you will get a copy of that recording as soon as it's made available. So be on the lookout here if you miss any aspects of the conversation or want to revisit any of the takeaways here today. We do have the chat feature that so many of you are already using. I love to see it. And I hope you'll continue to use that chat feature as we progress through our conversation today. If you have a specific question for any of our panelists, however, as we go through this conversation, I encourage you to use the Q&A feature that is also a part of this webinar. Using the Q&A feature as opposed to chat will make it easier for us to collect and document all of those questions so that we can answer them towards the end of our time here together. We will be reserving plenty of time to answer questions from you today. We're here to talk about ChatGPT and artificial intelligence more broadly and its impact on the prospective student journey. Artificial intelligence is seemingly everywhere right now in our news coverage, and there's a lot that is still unknown, of course, about where we're going with artificial intelligence. And when that happens, a lot of coverage tends to be very emotional and overly predictive. So depending on the article you're reading, artificial intelligence is either going to cure cancer or maybe end civilization as we know it, or maybe somewhere in between. At Simpson Scarborough, however, some of you may know, we are very focused on higher education marketing, and really helping higher education marketing leaders work smarter so that we can collectively strengthen the belief in and the power of higher education. And that is the approach or the lens through which we are having this conversation today. More specifically, today we are joined by a group of 3 panelists for this conversation today. First is Alex Alstrom. He is our Associate Director of Data Products. Hello, Alex. Thank you for being here today. We've got Bob Rafferty on the line. He is a partner and executive vice president. And we also have Tim Meyer here, who is a UX designer for Simpson Scarborough. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we are going to share the way that artificial intelligence is impacting the prospective student journey so that you can really think about how you can optimize your digital presence. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob to get us started today. Bob?
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Nice to see everybody here. This is awesome. I hope you're having a great morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. When we put this topic together a few months ago, we knew that there was some risk in doing that. We shared this talk in DC in July and had a really good reception for that. But we think that the value in starting this conversation with marketing leaders is that it's going to be something that you're already active in and will be with you for quite a long time. So if you've been a marketing leader or been in leadership roles, you've likely seen other moments like this before. If we kind of think back over the last 15 years or more, we could probably think of several milestones in there where technology has come in and caused a major shift in what your marketing strategy is. If we just think about potentially like one moment going back about 15 years, that introduction of the iPhone was this moment of how are we going to use mobile to our advantage, right? How are we going to market to students on smaller screens? And there was a lot of opinions about that. And things that we couldn't have foreseen, such as, then very shortly after that, rise of social media occurred, and we had to adjust those strategies once more. So we're at the beginning of a big kind of unknown moment. And what's unique about this is that this is a moment that's about knowledge and information. It's not about user interface or other pieces like that, though those will certainly be impacted by AI. So today, we're not going to predict, as Steve said, but instead we're going to look at some real use cases to help you understand what the nearest opportunities are for you. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to the team at this point. I'm going to be super active in the chat, and then as we get into some live Q&A towards the end, we'll be back in at that point. So handing it to Alex.
Great, thank you so much, Bob, for that context. Something that so when we kind of were thinking about this topic, we wanted to come at it from a little bit of a different angle than we saw the conversation taking place. And that was, we were really curious how prospects were going to use this technology. So a lot of the discussion that I'm sure y'all have heard is, hey, how can I write my content with AI, or how can I customize my user experience with AI? Those are incredibly important questions, but they're not the ones that we were interested in primarily, because we believe that the barriers to entry for prospects using this technology are much lower than institutions, right? Like, y'all are not going to be implementing AI until it's, until it has like a high level of accuracy and until the content is at a certain level of quality, whereas prospects are going to use it as long as it is better than the alternative. And so that's really the frame of reference that we want to come at today, is looking at your prospects and trying to put ourselves in their shoes and understand how they are grappling with this change that's affecting lots of different industries and different areas. So to do that, we looked at kind of common questions that prospects asked, and then we tried to figure out how they might answer them. And so we used some common UX techniques. We mapped out the user journey on the website, and then we went to search and looked at those same user journeys. And then finally, we approached it with AI. And at the end, we kind of looked at all of these different experiences and tried to note, compare, and contrast the relative strengths and weaknesses of each approach. We looked at 3 AI tools to do this. The first is ChatGPT 4. This is the paid version of ChatGPT. We used it because it's the most powerful model that is publicly available right now. And we wanted to anticipate, what does it look like when you're using the best technology? Because that's the direction things are moving. We also looked at Bing Chat. You're not going to see that reference as much in the presentation, but Bing Chat is probably the best web integrated AI. And so we wanted to see, how does AI work when it is querying the web and then returning the results back to you? And then finally, search generative experience from Google. Now, don't let its incredibly boring name fool you. This is one of the most important findings from our research. Search generative experience is the name that Google's giving its beta integration of AI into search. And this is how we see AI affecting a lot of the online web search engine experience. And so I want to kind of like draw your attention to that. As Bob said, we started this several months ago. And when we began it, search generative experience wasn't even publicly available yet. When we presented this in DC, it was only in beta for people who opted into it. But now Google is starting to roll it out with some members of the public. And so this is something that you should be aware of is up and coming and going to be really important to think about how to deal with. And we're going to look at some examples of how it transforms the search experience.
As Alex mentioned earlier, we conducted our research by mapping out some user journeys. And when we were deciding what user journeys to map, we focused on these 4 questions. Research has shown that these are the 4 key questions that prospective students are asking and looking to get answered when they are evaluating a college or university via its website. And those are, do they have the program I'm interested in? How much will it cost to go here? Will I get accepted here? And can I see myself here?
Great. And after we did all of this analysis, we looked at it and we came away with 5 takeaways. And so those are what we're going to share with you today. Is 5 main takeaways that you can take back to members of your community and that you should start thinking about when you start to grapple with AI. The first is that AI can and will replace your prospects visiting your website for many of their common queries. So AI provides a really powerful user experience, and Tim's going to get into that a little bit, but we're already seeing data that shows that consumers are enjoying and seeking out ChatGPT as a tool for finding answers. This data is from a survey, and so it's directional. I think it might be a little inflated. I don't know if 55% of people are using ChatGPT, but what it shows is that that already there's pretty strong market penetration for these products and that people are seeking them out and using them. Of people who use ChatGPT, 68% of them prefer it to search. This was a really compelling finding that we found. People enjoy the user experience. They think it gives them answers more quickly and that those responses are more tailored. That doesn't mean that they don't have any reservations, however, when they use ChatGPT. 43% of respondents found it unreliable, and 46, nearly half of people found it biased in some way, whether that's and the bias, when we looked at that, or this is from GWI, when they looked at that, they looked at a lot of different kinds of biases based on race, gender, but that a lot of people find that its results can be biased, I think is something important for us as marketers to consider. Even with those hesitations, since November, ChatGPT has seen a 10 times increase in its usage. Something I want to call out is that we are entering a prospect cycle that will be the first where ChatGPT is widely known and widely available. So November of last year, yes, it was technically on the market, but it was still new. It was pretty limited in its features. Now our prospects are going to have a pretty high level of familiarity with it, and it's going to be something that's been around a while. And so it's something that they're going to know how to use and know how to use to seek answers.
So with that background, we're going to jump into some of those user journeys that we were talking about earlier. A little bit more background before we start. So when Alex and I were conducting this research, we looked at a lot of different schools in terms of their websites, search, AI, big schools, small schools, East Coast, West Coast, North, South. We wanted to try to get some diversity there. For the purposes of today's talk, we're just going to be focusing on one school, and that's the University of Texas at Austin. There's 2 main reasons why we're going to do that. One, UT Austin is a large, prestigious university with a well-known brand, and to go with that, a large, complicated website. The second main reason is that I am personally an alum of UT Austin, hook 'em horns, and I felt like if I was going to be poking holes in anyone's website or experiences, it might as well be my own school. So if anyone here is from UT, please do not take any offense at anything that I said or try to revoke my degree. So we're going to start out by talking about how much will it cost to go here, because we know that's one of the main things that's on the top of the mind of our prospective students. And over on the right, we're going to see a little video of that user journey on the website. Our prospective student is going to go into admissions and aid, click tuition and costs. We get this calculator and it's a lot. We're kind of confused by it. We're just looking for that ballpark number right now, like that 5-figure, 4-figure, whatever that number is. We click here. We're going into this accordion. Now we have all these links to these PDFs. We're going to click for fall and spring. And what we're ultimately going to land on is this big table PDF. I'm overwhelmed by this, and any prospective student would be as well. And what we know from web analytics data is that most prospective students aren't actually going through this journey where they click through 6 or 7 different things on the site and land on this PDF. What they're more likely to do is to go to Google. This is an issue that is prevalent on a lot of higher ed websites where it's hard to find that number. And there are reasons that schools like to do this, some good, some bad. But something important to consider is that when websites make people work hard to find the price, people will wonder if they do so on purpose and lose trust in the university. So let's go to Google. How much does it cost to attend UT Austin? And this is what we get. We get some links here, all from UT at the top. That's pretty good. What we're not seeing is a clear answer to our question. We're seeing a lot of different numbers. We see a tuition number here, another one over here, another one down here from US News, and another one over here in the Google Knowledge panel. I don't expect you all to look at this closely, but something you will notice if you did is that those are all different numbers. We could click on one of these links, maybe from the UT website, but maybe we're just going to end up back in that loop that we were at earlier that took us to that PDF. Now, what you might also notice is above that first search result, there's a little blue bar that says, get an AI-powered overview for this search. That is that search generative experience in Google that Alex was talking about earlier. So what happens if we click generate here to get an AI answer? And what we get is a tidy little 2 paragraphs with an answer to our question of that tuition number for Texas residents, out-of-state residents for the 22-23 academic year, with some links to show where it's going to. That's a lot more helpful than either the website or those search results are going to be. Now let's see ChatGPT. We're going to ask it the same question. How much does it cost to attend UT Austin? What we're going to get first is some disclaimers from ChatGPT. They're getting a lot more conservative about telling you things. They want to say, we don't have all the data, we don't have real-time data, blah, 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 blah. The important thing to note here is that middle paragraph, which has a answer. It's from the 2021-22 academic year, but that tuition number doesn't change that much year to year. So for our prospective student, they're not going to be that concerned that that data might be somewhat 1 year out of date. They're just going to get that baseline number, and they get that so quick in ChatGPT. It happens almost instantly. So this is a superior user experience than navigating through the web in a lot of ways. And we can see that going even further than just looking at how much does it cost. The example I'm showing on the right is what I like to call ChatGPT College Counselor. We're going to tell ChatGPT about us, or in this case, about a fake prospective student that I made up. We're going to tell it about ourselves. We want to go to a small school, but not too small. We play soccer and might want to play in college. We like history and English, but we don't really know what we want to major in. We are from San Antonio, and we're okay with going outside of Texas, but we don't want to go anywhere further than a 10-hour drive from San Antonio. And we're also going to tell it our GPA and SAT score and ask, where should we consider applying? And here's what ChatGPT gives us. A handful of private schools in the South and Central Texas region, as well as a public in North Texas, but still within our drivable range at the University of North Texas. Each answer there provides a brief tie-in back to our criteria about testing scores, whether we would get in, whether they have good programs and the things that we're interested in, whether they have a soccer team. This isn't the most detailed thing, but this is a really good starting point if you're a prospective student and want to learn more. Look, you don't even know where to apply, then you can dig deeper into like, okay, I will look into this school or look into this school and try to learn more. And you can do a lot of that looking right within ChatGPT.
Great, thank you, Tim. And I think that like what that shows, right, is not necessarily how AI is going to be more accurate or more authoritative, because your institutional websites will always win on those marks. But what it really excels at is how accessible it is, right? Like it's at your fingertips. It's really easy to get those answers. And I think this is a threat and an opportunity, but for prospects, that easier experience, I think a lot of times is going to be, we see from other research that ease of access of information outweighs, spending lots of time to try and find the perfect answer. And it begs the question of how do we surface those more accurate insights faster? And this gets into something that AI is just generally, that's difficult about AI is that it speaks in the voice, or it speaks with the knowledge of your institution, but not necessarily in the voice of your institution. It represents itself as knowing a lot, whether or not that is the case. So we did a little bit of analysis because we wanted to understand like how good of an idea does, what does AI know about higher education? We took a look at one of the largest public data sets used to train these big language models. And what we found, and what you can see in front of you, is just a small portion of the EDUs that had been scraped to train these models. I think something that I want, everyone at this webinar to realize is that your institution is probably, your website is probably in the training data set for these models. We found nearly 9,000 institutions, individual EDUs that had been collected, who had data collected in order to train to train this large language model data set. And that accounts for nearly 300,000 individual pages. So the way that these data sets are compiled is that they don't necessarily scrape the whole site, but they scrape a portion of it. And so for each one of those institutions, some segment, some small portion of pages are collected, and then that's what the model's trained with.
Thanks, Alex. We're going to jump into the second of our 4 key questions. Do they have the program I'm interested in? And we got another fun video on the right. We're looking for a history major because, again, I was a history major at UT Austin. So we're going to go into academics, College of Liberal Arts. Now we have to go into a different menu. It's got a lot of links in it. We're going to click on majors and minors over here. Going to scroll down this page to this list of programs, look for history. We spot it over here, click here, and we end up on this program page with about 4 paragraphs of text, no images, no data points. That's about it. This is another journey that we don't expect most prospective students to actually do a lot of the times on the site. It went pretty quickly in the video, but for a lot of prospective students, there'd be a lot of backtracking and struggling. And what they would ultimately get to is this program page that doesn't tell them a whole lot. And they probably won't actually even bother to read through those 4 paragraphs. They'll move on to something else. So what about Google? What is it like to study history at UT Austin? And we get links. Again, luckily, we're coming up with UT Austin appearing at the top. We get what history majors do, the undergraduate program, history major over here. It's not really clear where we should click and how helpful that would be. So what if we had that search generative experience like we had earlier? Let's see what that does. And we get this box here. This is also not that helpful in what we're looking for. It gives us some brief facts that the AI has spouted out about from College Factual about the ranking for the history program, both nationally, as a little couple sentences about the program that, is somewhat interesting, but not that interesting, and stuff like that. Something I want to point out here, now that we're getting used to this search generative experience box, is the interface of it and how Google prioritizes it over the traditional search result. In this screenshot, that big pink box with the generative experience, the AI answer, is taking up over half the screen, pushing down our traditional search results down to the bottom part. It has color, which draws the eyes in, whereas the regular Google results are just in white. And the main CTA here that is bold and sticking out to the user is not anything with the search result. It's ask a follow-up underneath the answer there. This is Google saying, from a design perspective, you should be able to find your answer to your query in our AI thing. And if you don't have your answer, or if you have another question, we want you to answer in the AI tool, not in the Google search box. This is really going to have some big implications on the search experience as we know it. So back to ChatGPT, we're going to ask it the same question. What's it like to be a history major at UT Austin? And we get a pretty straightforward answer pretty quickly. It's still a lot of text. So if we're looking for anything more than text, it's not going to be that much more helpful than that program page. But there's a bit of hierarchy. We can kind of scan these different things, diverse course offerings, engaging faculty, stuff like that. So Alex was talking earlier about the voice of AI and how AI knows all this stuff about your school, but it doesn't talk like your website would. There are positives and negatives to this. Negatives is obviously all of your brand voice and tone and stuff like that is not there. I think that makes it even more important on the platforms that you do control, like your website, that brand voice, tone, all that stuff is consistent and well thought out. But on the AI tool, it's going to, by default, give a more neutral voice. It's not a bad thing because what we see in research is that many prospective student visitors to websites are hesitant to believe information if it seems to come from the university's marketing department. That's not anything against anyone in the university's marketing department. It's just the nature of frankly, typically young people being skeptical of things that they feel like are being too sold to them or don't feel like speak to them. So one of the cool things I think about ChatGPT and AI tools is that users can control and customize the AI's voice to meet their needs and interests. If this seems too long to them, they can ask to get this information in shorter or in a more simpler answer, and the AI tool will immediately and quickly do that. If they want to learn more about one of these topics, they can ask for more detail about one of those topics. Or if they wanted to say, hear about this program from the voice of a famous Longhorn, they can ask, tell me what it's like to be a history major at UT Austin like you are Matthew McConaughey. And this is what we're going to get. All right. I am not a comedian or good at celebrity impressions, so that is the most I will do in terms of any voices. But you can see in this brief snippet of the answer, we're getting some pretty different stuff than what we were saying earlier. We're talking about a journey through time, a philosophical time machine, delving deep into the tapestry of human experience, unlocking the mystery of civilizations long gone. This is different than, if I go back a couple slides, back to what we're seeing here. Now, something interesting that you do see is that the AI is still going to touch on a lot of the same topics. They're just going to do it in a very different tone and voice. And the user could do that with Matthew McConaughey. They probably won't, but they could do it with anyone else, real or fictional that they care about. And I think that is, it's a little scary because it's different than what that university, how UT talks about things on their website, but it is more accessible to our users.
And that is such a great setup for our next takeaway, which is that AI likes to give answers, right? So if you ask me to talk about, UT Austin's history program as Matthew McConaughey, I would probably just roll my eyes at you, but AI immediately responds. And this has real challenges that it poses, but it also has some real interesting opportunities and implications that the AI is so willing and excited to always give an answer. Okay, so I want to talk, though, a little bit about what we mean by AI. We've been using a lot of humanizing language here for what is just a giant computer. And this meme, for me, was something that really helped me to understand that thinking about AI like a person is really going about it wrong. So this is actually a meme that a lot of AI engineers share to describe how their work works. And so, the strange tentacle monster, Lovecraftian creature, right? That's the AI. And then through all of these very careful procedures, AI engineers make it output really human-seeming responses. And I think it's important to understand and remember that these AIs are built to seem like people, even though under the hood, they're not. They're very complex algorithms. So how do they train AI models? Well, the first step is something called unsupervised learning. Now, I promise we're not going to get way into the weeds here, but I think that this context will be really helpful in understanding, why the results are the way they are, et cetera. So the first thing they do is unsupervised learning, where essentially you compile, again, just reams and reams of data. This is where that, the 300,000.edu pages are going. You get all this information together from all these different disciplines, and you set the AI on it, and it builds connections between information that no human ever would. An example of this, I was playing around, I wanted to see what's the most kind of strange combination I could come up with, and I asked ChatGPT to explain the works of Emily Dickinson to me as a microbiologist, and it was able to, right? That would be really hard for a person, but AI is good at making those kind of strange connections. However, when you go through that process, you don't get anything that resembles human conversation. And so the next step that AI developers take is they need to teach the AI how people act. And so they collect tons of, in a process called supervised learning, tons of human conversations, usually from customer service interactions, and feed those to the model. And what that allows the model to do is learn, okay, this is how, humans typically respond to each other in conversation. And then the final step is something called reinforcement learning from human feedback, where a researcher, actually a group of researchers, take the model, sit down with it, and award it. They ask it questions and then award it points on how much they like its response. And what this does is it teaches the model, hey, like these are responses that people are more attracted to. These are ones they're less attracted to. But something I really want to emphasize for you all, that this process is, the model is trying to figure out what people want. And so it's not necessarily trying to learn what truth is, it's not some like deep moral philosophy that's being instilled. It's just trying to imitate what it thinks people will want. And so the result of that process is that the models are trained to be, to please us, to do things that we will like. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means in application. And I promise there will be very little math, but I think this will help to kind of contextualize it. So 1 + 1, you all see that on your screen and you immediately know the answer without thinking about it. The answer is 2. You've seen this over and over again throughout your life, and you've just memorized the answer. That's how AI answers math problems, right? It's seen so many math problems on so many web pages that it can memorize, again, I'm kind of using a human word, but it can memorize what the response would be. But what happens if you give it something a little trickier? In this case, we have if you came to me and asked what the answer to this question was, I would either say no, thank you, or I would reach for a calculator. AI, again, is not trained to push back. And so it is going to try to answer, even if it isn't going to be able to answer very effectively. The way it does that is by using kind of reasonable heuristics. So an AI algorithm looking at this would notice that both numbers end with 2, right? And they're both even. So the outcome is going to be an even number. It also notices that the numbers that are being multiplied are 4 digits. And so the answer is likely going to be somewhere around, it's going to be greater than 1 million and less than like 10 million. So it can use these kind of heuristics to guess that the answer is probably going to be somewhere around 3,700,000. Anyways, I'm not going to read it all, but you get the idea. I actually ran this same math problem through AI, and it got almost all the digits correct, except for 1. And you hear that and you're like, dang, that's pretty good. That's better than I could do. But here's the difference. 1 digit actually makes a lot of impact in math, right? 1 digit off is incorrect. And so if you think about your brand, it's going to be able to it's going to give a reasonable answer, right? Like this is the answer is reasonable, but is it perfectly accurate? Possibly not, right? What is it going to be 1 digit off about that's going to confuse your prospective students or make it less useful or whatever?
So with that, we're going to jump into where people might want AI to do something that it might try to give it an answer on that. It's, will I get accepted here? There's no video this time. This is a page that I found on the UT website because I couldn't find another one that gave a better description of how a prospective student might determine from the UT website whether or not they would get into UT. Now, what we know is that our prospective students are looking for details on these things. They don't want to just see what's going to be reviewed. They want to know how they compare to people who get into UT Austin. And when they can't find that, that decreases their trust in the university, and they're still going to look for it elsewhere. All prospective students want to know how likely it is that they could be accepted to each university. GPAs, ACT, SAT, percentage of accepted students from when they say these help students make these estimations. This is really important because no prospective students wants to waste their time looking at a school, getting emotionally invested, applying if they don't think that there is a somewhat chance of them getting in. So what do? They go to Google and we type in chances of getting into UT Austin with this GPA and this SAT score. And these are the results we get. Notice none of them are from UT. They're from third-party sites like Prep Scholar, Campus Real. These sites, you go in and it'll give you an estimation of chances based off of those stats. But it's still, we have to click through them. We probably have to put in an email address to get the answers that we want. It's not that great of an experience. What if we go to ChatGPT and tell them the same thing? And here's what we get. Now, this is something that's interesting because ChatGPT used to be a lot more aggressive when we first started doing this research back in the spring and early summer, where they would give you a full estimation. They would say your chances of getting into UT are good, not good, stuff like that. What they do now, again, with all of this, as an AI language model, blah, 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 is this, which is tell you that UT Austin is highly competitive, and with a GPA of this and SAT score, it's important to note that the average admitted student at UT Austin typically has a higher GPA and SAT score. It has that data, and it's telling you, hey, with this, you're lower. So that's something that prospective students might be doing to estimate their chances based off of those high profile things. Obviously, there's way more to college admissions than just GPA and SAT, ACT scores, but a quick way to estimate their admissions chances. So how can higher ed improve? And we think transparency is the way. Transparency fosters trust between students and institutions. Over on the right is an example of an admissions facts page from Brown University's website, where they show from their last undergraduate class how many applications they got, how many of those were admitted, the acceptance rate, what percentage of the students they accepted were in the top 10% of their graduating class, and then SAT ranges here. None of this is telling a user don't apply, or prospective student don't apply here, but it is giving them the facts so that they can consider whether or not they think, based off of their scores, where they were in their graduating class, stuff like that, their likelihood of being accepted. And this content is also helpful to be on here because that means it's getting scraped and trained into the AI data models, and more likely to provide accurate answers when people go into ChatGPT and ask, hey, this is my GPA and SAT score, what are my chances of getting in?
So at this point, you're probably wondering, right? I hope we set a lot of context around, this is the implications of AI, and here's some of the opportunities it presents, here's some of the challenges. But you're probably wondering, that's all, well and fine, but what can I do? And one of the things we realize going through this process is that for the many strengths that these AI chat tools have, one that they really cannot match is experience, and furnishing an experience, a digital experience for prospects, not in any sort of compelling way or in any comparison to what you all do every day.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that through the lens of our fourth and final question, can I see myself here? And here's where the website has the advantage over Google and AI, because we have visuals on the website. We're going to see the UT homepage, which has bold brand images. The content feels alive. We have big burnt orange color images of students on campus scrolling in the lab, stats, things like this. This is the kind of experience that we're not going to get in ChatGPT, where we just have that big text field, or on Google, where we just have all those links. This homepage is compelling, but we need more of this on higher ed websites to draw users to experience a site rather than just look for things on AI or search. So let's take a look at search. What's it like to be a student at UT Austin? UT's website is getting outranked by Quora here. Most of those answers on Quora are from years ago too, which is not that helpful. Our first page that's showing up for UT is this Life in Austin page down here. And this is what it is. It's a fine page. It's got some small little images about what students could do if they live in Austin, but it doesn't really encapsulate the experience in a meaningful way of what it's like to be a student at UT Austin. So ChatGPT, this is what we get when we ask it what it's like to be a student at UT Austin. And it's even worse in some ways. We just have text. It kind of looks like that answer to our question about programs, but this is about being a student, like student life, what that experience is like. And it comes off as very generic. It feels like you could replace UT Austin with pretty much any school, and Austin with pretty much any college town in there, and it would apply to some degree or another. This is not helpful to our prospective student. We're going to talk about Apple for a second, and not just because they announced new iPhones yesterday. Apple does a thing that I think is pretty cool in terms of how they talk about their products and talk about information. There's regular apple.com, and then there is support.apple.com, which is what we see a screenshot of the right. Most people don't ever go directly to support.apple.com. They Google, why is my iPhone doing this? And they end up on a page. Support.apple.com is minimal, clean, has tons, decades of information about Apple products and how to use them and fix them and stuff. very different from what we see on regular apple.com, which has big animations, product images, people using the products, buttons to buy. These are designed to sell the product. Apple fully immerses on apple.com users into its experience. Higher ed could do more of this while also still having that support.apple.com where we have all of our information that users can still access and it's there to be trained into AI models, but it's not the thing that we're using to sell users on the experience. And I'm not saying throw out your website and make it like Apple. I don't think that's a good strategy, but I think a good place to start is with things like microsites, campaign landing pages, and home pages. On the right, you see an example of some of our recent work for the University of Montana. It's a campaign landing page that really immerses the brand of the University of Montana and the state of Montana in a really fun, captivating way. This is the kind of experiential content that will bring users in, that gives them an experience that ties them to the university. That's not just things that they could find. Nothing on here is something that they could find in ChatGPT.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, ChatGPT could never make you a Spotify playlist like that. So, so yeah, as to kind of bring this all home for our last point, as I said at the beginning, this is a little speculative, and I appreciate y'all kind of joining us in the journey of trying to predict, not predict, but try to guess what the future might look like. But I would be amiss as someone who works in Simpson Scarborough's research and analytics team if I did not bring some survey data to the table. And this is from Pew, who's conducted research on technology perceptions for years now. And something that is really interesting, they've been asking about AI, is that you can see a really strong trend here that as people, younger generations, that they are less concerned and more excited about AI. So that middle section kind of stays the same, right? The like in between people, hovers around 47, 45%. But what really moves is the most concerned and the most excited people. This data is only covers 18 to 29-year-olds, which means your prospects are already, Gen Z and younger are already a more, probably directionally more engaged group than what's shown here. In fact, we know that some of the applications and social media platforms that Gen Z prefers the most are those that are most closely integrated with AI. So if you look at TikTok uses these same complex neural networks that underpin large language models, that's how those results are so effective. Same with Instagram, like really powerful algorithms. And the reason they like them is because it gives the response that people, that you're looking for quickly, and it feels customized. I also think this data is really interesting. I want to point out, that younger generations are not completely devoid of concern here, right? So if you look at AI making major life decisions or knowing people's thoughts and behaviors, that there's still overwhelming concern for those implications. But what is the difference between younger generations and older? The younger generation and older generations is that those most concerned people are moving into equally excited, concerned, somewhat excited, very excited. So we're seeing a trend, and that trend is away from like real, kind of, again, the most concerned to kind of being comfortable with AI. And I think you really see that in this customer service data point at the end. And I actually recommend you screenshot this because I think this is something we need to be sharing out with our communities, that 18 to 29-year-olds, the thing that differentiates them from all ages is that they're just kind of, they have like general, maybe positive opinions, and if not positive, at least equal positive and negative when it comes to handling customer service. And we can kind of extrapolate that to, interacting with information online, et cetera, that they actually kind of expect it and they're okay with it, and I think that this is something that we need to realize, is that over time that these preferences are going to only become more ingrained, that this is how our users are going to expect information from us. And if we can't ideate and think about how to present them this information, that it's going to feel discordant with the way that they're getting information in every other part of their life. So with that, and again, feel free to screenshot our takeaways. We're gonna have some time for questions, but I just want to thank you all for joining us in this journey. This was a really interesting exercise looking at these different things. And again, we don't have a ton of answers, but I hope we started a lot of conversations here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex and Tim and Bob, for all this really great conversation here. I think hopefully everyone feels this way. There's a lot to consider here when we're talking about the different takeaways and insights that someone might have based on some of this information. And that's not even considering how quickly all of this is evolving. And I think that's actually part of the challenge here, right? Is that there is no one single action item that should be taken based on this information. Rather, I like to think that next steps are pretty unique to the audiences you serve, the goals that you may have as a marketing team, as a campus, and then of course the marketing maturity that your organization and your team have at the moment. So at Simpson Scarborough, one thing we've done here is we've organized different next steps that you might take into these 3 categories. So for some of you, the right next step might be just to better learn the situation. So that C category. This might be really where you are trying to just understand more specific information around your particular audiences, perspectives about artificial intelligence, and preferences as they go through their own unique prospective student journey. Or you might be in this understand category, which is where you want to better understand through audits how your own digital properties are being interacted with by prospective students, prospective transfer students, current students, alumni, etc. Or perhaps you might be already in this far right column, which is the act category, where really you are adapting the way that you are approaching, building, or even refining your digital experiences based on all of the previous things that we mentioned in the see and understand categories about you're able to make those adjustments based on how you are interpreting the activities that your prospective students are taking here. Whether you're using an agency like Simpson Scarborough or whether you're doing this in-house, I think these are all really smart activities to be thinking about and working on, even as this is an evolving situation. Because I think, as Bob mentioned even at the beginning of the presentation, we've seen rapid change before. And I think in these cases, the worst thing that we can do as marketers in this situation is just sit still and wait for things to evolve, because that's when things get a little bit more out of our control. With that, we've got about 10 minutes left of this presentation here, and we would love to hear from you. It's been really great seeing a lot of these questions come in as we have been talking. I know we've been trying to answer some of those asynchronously, but we have some time if anyone wants to put a question into the Q&A feature. I'm going to start with a question that just came in from Deanna, which is there any way to control what web pages are being used to train artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's a great question. So initially, it's hard because each of these different tools gets their data from different places, Google versus OpenAI. And I think that we need to consider the fact that, like, Microsoft is going to train their models differently from Apple, et cetera. So that is just one of the challenges here. When we're talking specifically about OpenAI, though, they created ChatGPT. They recently rolled out an equivalent to robot.txt for all my developers out there. Y'all probably know what I'm talking about. But just as you can ask Google not to index certain pages for search, they now have a protocol for asking OpenAI not to include data in future model training. That is not retroactive. GPT-4 and GPT-3, the ones that most people are using, are trained on data only going up to 2021. But as new models come out, that is important to consider. What part of your web pages do you want to allow these AI to scrape, and which do you not? I want to, give a little hesitation though. Be careful about asking it not to train, because again, it's still going to try and give answers, even if it doesn't have that data. So I think we need to be selective and intentional about what data we allow these models to scrape from us and what we don't, just as we would with Google search.
Yeah, I'd say learn from the past on that one too. Like, there were some moments where we're not going to be on Facebook, and we all know how that went down. So as you're thinking about what that strategy might look like, being proactive with what the content is like on your website, what the quality is, what your volume of content is, like that's where I'd be focusing time, as opposed to saying no, we're not going to be part of a future scrape. And though GPT-4 is using an older set of data, there's a very high likelihood that they've already gone back to your site and pulled a more recent set of data. They're just not using it yet in their models.
I want to turn to another question that came in a few minutes earlier, and it was actually related to those 3 columns that we shared earlier. What would you recommend is the best place to start for those who are only now realizing the potential of artificial intelligence, especially for enrollment? And Bob, I'm going to stick with you here to start us off.
Cool. I think that the most direct answer for that is start using the tools. Keep ChatGPT open in one of your tabs and think about it as a first stop for when you're trying to ask a question, or when you're trying to think about if you're working on some marketing strategy and thinking, well, what might a prospective student be asking? Like, I would start there, and then I would also like turn on some of the beta features that might be available in Google or in Bing. Like, those are features you can turn on, because that's what everyone will be using a few months from now. So that's where I would start. I would start to immerse myself. I think that any level of reading that you're going to have out there, the stuff that ranks the highest is the salacious end of world stuff. And the best way to teach yourself is to just dive in and start using the platforms.
I mean, and that's exactly what we did, to your point, Bob, right? We were kind of ambivalent about all these characterizations, and we were just like, what is it? What does it look like? You know? So I would use the questions that Tim highlighted, right? Those 4 questions. Can I see myself here? How much does it cost to go here? Does this institution offer my program? And the 4th one,
will I get in?
Thank you. Will I get in? Just pretend to be a prospect. Pretend to be a prospect and see what happens when you get those questions, and just kind of go through those user flows, right? This is the equivalent of, like, you don't need to have a TikTok presence, you know, necessarily, or like a Threads presence, but like you should probably be there. Like, you should at least have an account and see how people are using it, right? I think that's kind of the equivalent here with AI.
Amazing. I'll turn to a question. It's interesting. We just had a question about people and institutions who are just really figuring out the impact of artificial intelligence. I want to ask about someone who may be on the opposite end of the spectrum. Does anyone on this panel have any examples of universities who are optimizing for artificial intelligence well already? And bonus points if you can think of someone who is on the smaller side.
And this kind of relates to something that was in the other chat too. Like, I don't think that there is a good example yet, meaning what does optimization look like? Are we there yet? Do we know what those perimeters look like? I would turn that over to someone else to say if there is, but I don't think we've got a best use case.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, listen, I really love to give answers. I don't think I can say quite yet. What we do know, and what I do want to reiterate though, is that, you know, making sure that you have relevant, accurate information on your website, not having sensitive or erroneous information, that's really important, and making sure that we prioritize experiences, so that when users come to our website, that they are getting something that they can't get from ChatGPT.
I just want to say artificial intelligence would have made up an answer there. So kudos to all of you for showing excellent human judgment.
We're not making it up. Yeah.
There's a great question that came in the chat, but I see it towards the bottom here, which is how does artificial intelligence affect SEO optimization? I think this is a really great question.
Who wants it?
I'm not an SEO expert. I think what we see with the search generative experience is that it seems like some of that traditional SEO work might not be as important. Something also to consider is what that search generative experience is. It does reference links where it's pulling that data from. I don't know enough about how that tool works to know how that ties in with how Google traditionally does search rankings, but yeah, I would imagine, Alex, and you can expand on this, but I think the same rules still apply, but also maybe not as important as it used to be.
So I want to draw a distinction here between ChatGPT and Google, right? So Google is integrating AI responses into its search results, whereas ChatGPT is a chatbot. ChatGPT, I think the SEO question is more complicated. We just don't know exactly how they're using and we don't know what the model likes. Google, on the other hand, we do know that SEO is still very relevant because the AI, the way it works, right, is there's a chat interface. That chat interface, you ask it a question, it formulates that into a search, and then it uses the already existing SEO infrastructure to surface the most relevant pieces of information. It reformulates that, and then it spits it out as a response. So I actually think in a lot of ways, SEO is more important with AI. Specifically, again, I want to differentiate here, but specifically with Google, because you're not even, it's not surfacing the web page, but it's surfacing the insight. And so if your website doesn't have all of the information really clear and accessible in a way that SEO, that search engines can optimize for, they're going to go to another provider. And the challenge is that it's kind of white labeled, like they're not, the end user is not going to know if this is coming from a review website or from US News and World Report, or if it's coming from your website. So making your content really accessible to these to the search engines is going to make it prioritized in responding to search requests.
Amazing. Well, I do want to do a quick time check. We are right at the top of the hour. As always, this is the fastest 60 minutes of the day whenever we get an opportunity to chat with all of you. Again, I want to say the same thing that I said at the top of the call here. I really appreciate everyone at Simpson Scarborough, really appreciate everyone who gave us your time, attention, your amazing questions, your responses to some of the takeaways here within the chat. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. We will be sharing a recording of this presentation with you in the coming days. We also have a few additional weeks of content coming out, including content on that SEO question that just came out, so be on the lookout for that. If there's any questions you did not have time to ask or want to follow up with us, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. You can find us on all of the social channels, as well as hello@simpsonscarborough.com if there's a question you want to ask and didn't get to it. But until then, thank you so much for being here. Keep on keeping on. We will see you next time.